Hi everyone, so a really warm welcome to all of you tuning in tonight. It's great to be able to practice with you. So my name's Lisa, for those who don't know me, and I'm joined tonight by Sudhika, and we'll be leading the class together. And yeah, it's a really good opportunity just to come and practice with the Brixton Buddhist community, and our class is open to everyone. So if it's your first time, especially big welcome, and if you've been coming along for a long time, then equally it's really good to see you, and we hope that we'll be able to offer something that everybody finds useful. So what would be really useful, because at the moment we're a really small team tonight, so alongside me and Sudhika we have Jack on tech, so it would be really nice to get a sense of who else is around, so please just say hello in the chat and then we can do a bit of a shout out a bit later. And just to orientate you to the class, for the last 5 weeks we've been exploring a theme around meditations on reality, and this is an opportunity to really investigate some of the things that are coming up in our practice, and in particular we've been looking at what's known as the 3 lakshanas, the 3 marks of existence, and these are ways which we can examine what's coming up for us in meditation and help us see how some of the views we have about reality actually are quite unhelpful and can lead to suffering. So we've been spending 2 weeks on each lakshana. So far we've covered impermanence, we've also covered then unsatisfactoriness, and today we're starting the last of the 3 marks of existence, which is insubstantiality or non-self, and Sudhika is going to be saying some more about that in a bit. But to start us off with, we thought it would be nice to do a brief practice just to help us arrive in the space. So I'll be starting off just by guiding us through a 3-stage breathing space. And a 3-stage breathing space is a short meditation that you can use at any stage of your day. You can use it like sitting down, like we'll be tonight, or you can even use it when you're walking or when you're waiting for a bus. It's a really adaptable meditation that can just help you take a few minutes to ground yourself and refocus your attention to help connect to a more spacious awareness. So I'll lead us through that. So taking a moment to settle, then finding a comfortable posture where you feel comfortable but which also helps you be upright. So taking a moment to connect to the sensations of contact with the floor, where you're sitting on the chair, and if possible getting a sense of uplift from the base of your spine. So without straining, you're just lifting your spine up gently from its base, allowing your shoulders to roll back, your hands and arms just to be at ease in your lap. And if it feels okay to do so, gently allowing the eyes to close. So having adjusted our posture, we can move on to the first stage of the breathing space, becoming aware of how our experience is right now. So simply noticing what's going on for you at the moment. Noticing any physical sensations in the body. Seeing if we can bring a friendly awareness to our experience right now. So whatever physical sensations come up for us, whether they're pleasant sensations, or even tense or painful sensations. So seeing if we can meet them with the same kindly curiosity. bringing as best we can a sense of allowing to our experience, whatever it might be. So as well as physical sensations, notice any emotions that are showing up for us at the moment. Whether these are pleasant emotions or unpleasant, or even neutral, neither pleasant or unpleasant. Taking this time just to become aware of what's going on for us. And then noticing what thoughts are coming and going in and out of our awareness. You might like to label the mental activity, the planning, the worrying, or thinking about particular things. And whatever it is your thoughts are like, again, as best we can, just trying to be curious about them. Noticing that this is part of our experience right now. Now moving on to the second step of the breathing space, gathering our awareness around the breathing. So choosing one place in the body where you experience the breath vividly. So it could be at the tip of your nose, or in your mouth, or in the chest, or deep down in the abdomen. Wherever it is you choose to focus, allowing your attention to rest here. Experiencing the change in patterns of sensations associated with breathing in and breathing out. So we're not trying to change our breathing in any way. We're just becoming aware of how we're already breathing. Just noticing the change in patterns of sensations as we breathe in and breathe out. And from time to time you'll notice that your attention's wandered off the breath. You've become caught up in thoughts or feelings or sounds or other sense experiences. And that's completely normal, it's just what our mind does. It jumps around from subject to subject. And in noticing that we've become distracted, we've become mindful again. And so we can gently bring our attention back to following the breathing again, in whatever part of the body we're focusing on. Now moving on to the third stage of the breathing space, expanding our awareness throughout our whole body. So still aware of the breath, but zooming out our focus so it takes in the whole of our body, from our feet on the floor, right up through our legs, our lower body, our back, our abdomens and chest, right up through our shoulders, taking in the arms, and then including the head. So holding the whole body now in this softer awareness, and aware of the breath moving in and out of the whole body breathing. And whatever other sensations you notice in the body, and simply breathing with them, folding them within this more expansive awareness. And then as we start to bring the practice to a close, perhaps forming the intention to take this more spacious awareness out into the next moments of your evening. And whenever you're ready, opening your eyes if they're closed and bringing the practice to an end. So it would be nice to see if anybody's checked in the chat. Here's something we prepared earlier. Thanks to Jack. Brilliant. So there's quite a few of you tuned in. So hello to Alison and Cameron. Hello to Tara and Ian. To Catalin, Annie, Debs, Tom, Joe and Susanna. So yeah, it's great to see you all, and if anybody else comes in, then do feel free to put your names in the chat too, and we'll do a shout out to you later. So thank you. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Sudhika now. Thank you.
Yeah, so as Lisa mentioned, we've in this series of talks in the class, we've been looking at this traditional teaching of the three lakshanas, the three marks or characteristics of conditioned existence. And this week we're looking at possibly the most daunting of the three lakshanas, certainly the most difficult to explain, which is the lakshana known as anatta, which is the traditional teaching that all phenomena are insubstantial and lacking any fixed essence or separate selfhood. So I thought I'd just wheel back a little bit from explaining anatta, just to explain a little bit about why the Buddha taught these practices, why the Buddha taught these reflections. I mean, the Buddha said that the whole aim of his teaching was the ending of suffering. So all of the teachings that the Buddha gave were to give us tools to work with our own experience in a way which means that we suffer less. So the aim of these reflections is to address one of the root causes of our suffering and to enable us to, well, to develop a sort of happier and easier way of living. So it's important to bear that in mind, the kind of why we do these practices. So the aim of the reflection is to help us to loosen the patterns of attachment and identification that cause us suffering. You could say that from the Buddhist analysis, the reason why we suffer is because we misinterpret the nature of reality. We misinterpret the nature of our experience. And then we react in emotionally unhelpful ways to that misinterpretation. So we misperceive what's going on in our experience, and then we react in ways that make the situation worse. And so the aim of reflecting on these characteristics is to lead to a deep process of letting go of the patterns patterns of craving and aversion, which in a way prevent us from experiencing a sense of inner peace, freedom and well-being. So the most important aspect of these reflections, in a way, is not so much the content of the reflection, but the way that the reflection affects the nature of our minds, the nature of our awareness, the nature of our experience. So when we're reflecting on these things, it's important to keep a background sense of, well, what's happening in our experience as we're having these reflections, and looking particularly for this sense of letting go, sort of opening out to experience, particularly a sort of letting go of any tendency to try and control our experience or fix our experience, or perhaps hold difficult experience out. So if we come to look inside our bodies, very often we'll find that we have these subtle patterns of tension and holding in our bodies. And these subtle patterns of tension and holding are often a sign that at some level we're trying to manipulate our experience, or trying to hold difficult aspects of experience out of consciousness, out of awareness. And we could say that the whole purpose of the practice is to encourage a letting go of those subtle patterns of tension and those subtle habits of trying to manipulate our experience through craving and aversion. So as we reflect on these characteristics, we can start to see much more clearly how things really are, what is actually happening in our moment-by-moment experience. And that seeing encourages this letting go of craving and aversion, and opens us to this deeper sense of spaciousness and freedom. And the Buddha said that, the aim of the practice, using a wonderful ancient Indian expression, is chitta vimoksha, the heart's release, the release of the spirit. So we're looking in our practice for this quality of the chitta vimoksha, the liberation of the heart. So I need to explain a little bit about this characteristic of anatta, or lack of fixed, separate selfhood. So as you're probably aware, one of the central teachings of the Buddha is that all phenomena arise and pass away in dependence on conditions. So all phenomena are transient, all phenomena are changing constantly, moment by moment, including ourselves, including our own experience. And this characteristic of anatta, it's not saying that phenomena don't exist at all. It's not saying we don't have any self at all. But what the teaching is saying is that all phenomena, including ourselves, don't exist in a fixed, permanent sense. That nothing, including ourselves, has a nature that is fixed and permanent. So if we think about our own experience, if we're honest with ourselves, I think we'd realise that most of our thoughts actually revolve around our sense of self. If we're driving around and, if we're busy, we're, thinking about our work, there's this constant sense of selfhood, which almost, provides the central focus for all our mental activity. And I think the way we usually imagine it, the way we usually picture it, is that we have a kind of flow of experience that's a bit like a movie going on, everything changes. But somewhere behind all of that experience, we have an idea that there's an us that's kind of having the experience. A little bit like there's a self that's sort of sitting in the cinema, watching experience unfold on the screen, as it were. And a lot of our mental activity comes out of that idea of there being a fixed, separate selfhood, as it were, behind our experience. But what this teaching is saying is that if we actually look clearly and closely at what's going on moment by moment in our experience, we come to realise, perhaps gradually, that, there isn't a self behind the flow of our experience. That, if you like, our sense of self is part of the flow of experience. So our sense of self actually arises and passes away, moment by moment, along with the content of our experience. And there's nothing as it were, sort of behind or extra to the flow of our experience. And that's what the teaching is saying. And if we can come into a deep understanding of that, if we can learn to kind of settle in that realization, then in a way it opens up this terrific sense of freedom and creativity and spontaneity, this chitta vimoksha, this freedom of the heart's release. So I could give a sort of couple of examples. I mean, for example, if we think about a candle flame, if we look at a candle and we see the candle flame, then we have a definite sense that yes, there is a flame. There is a flame, and it carries on through time. It maybe flickers a little bit, but we can say, well, that is the flame. But I think if we think about it or investigate it a little bit more deeply, perhaps we could look at the flame and we could ask ourselves, well, is the flame in one moment the same as the flame in the next moment, or is it different? I think if we look at that, we start to see, well, actually, the flame is not the same from moment to moment. Actually, it's burning different fuel, it's burning different wax from one moment to the next. But there's also a sort of continuity of conditions that kind of joins one moment of the flame with another moment of the flame. And what this is pointing to is our self, our sense of self is actually like this. We have experiences that follow one after the other. And out of that continuity of those experiences, that continuous flow of experience, we actually get the sense of being a continuous self. So this sense of being a fixed, permanent self is actually itself a kind of conditioned thing. And a lot of the difficulty, a lot of the suffering that we have in our lives is because we misinterpret something that's fluid, ever-changing, transient, impermanent. We misinterpret that as being something fixed and permanent that we need to sort of cherish and defend and plan around. So this is the kind of insight that this reflection is pointing us towards. It's asking us to look at our experience and say, well, even this very fundamental sense that we have of being a self and being in some senses separate from the objects of our experience, well, is that true? Is that the reality of what we're experiencing moment by moment? So the reflection is very much, look at your experience and actually try to see what's going on and see how what's going on moment by moment, this flow of experience, is actually different to our normal common sense, if you like, ideas about how our experience is. So really that's the challenge of the reflection. The reflection is asking us to look very directly, very freshly, very without preconceptions at our moment by moment experience, to kind of really see what's going on. You can sort of hear these teachings and sort of go, I get it, I kind of understand the teaching in a conceptual way. But what this is trying to do is to take that conceptual understanding into our direct experience so that we can actually see moment by moment what's happening in the way that we're perceiving our thoughts, our emotions, our visual perceptions, the whole of our experience. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an intro. It's actually quite a difficult thing to explain this. I was going to say you probably need a few hours to explain the teaching of anatta in a kind of full way. And within the Buddhist tradition, there's so much that's written. There's so much really profound teaching around this sort of central insight of non-self. So I guess what I've given you is just a few very, very basic introductory ideas to sort of get us started. And what I'll do now is I'll lead us through a period of reflection. So we'll do it in the context of the mindfulness of breathing practice. So we'll set ourselves up and we'll perhaps do the first 2 stages of the mindfulness of breathing with the counting. And then at the point that we let go of the counting and go into just watching the breath, I'll introduce this element of reflection. Just to say a little bit about how to reflect. So in reflection, we're using thought, we're using conceptual ideas to look at our experience in a different way. So, and I think it's really important that when we reflect, that we stay as much as we can in direct mindful contact with the content of our experience. So, I mean, typically say we would take this idea of impermanence or non-self and we'd apply it to the movement of the breathing. So we'd become very focused on the breath, the movement of the breath coming in and out, and then we would just bring this thought in very subtly. Well, this breathing is impermanent. This breathing is moving constantly. In a way, there's nothing fixed in this movement of the breath. There's no point at which we can say, oh, this is the breath. There's just this continuous flow. So, in a way, we're taking the ideas of the Buddha's teaching and we're then bringing them very directly to our moment-by-moment experience, which in a sense changes the quality of our awareness and sort of opens up this deeper process of freeing and letting go of attachments. So we'll do the reflection, but I really encourage you to do it as mindfully as you can. And while we're doing the reflection, keep noticing the quality of your experience. Keep noticing, well, is the reflection actually changing the quality of my awareness, the quality of my experience? And then really absorbing and noticing and letting in that effect into our experience. So I'll stop talking in a minute. I'll just allow you to set yourselves up for meditation. Make yourself comfortable. Feel your connection with the ground. Feel your spine rising up from your pelvis. So your posture is stable and grounded, but at the same time quite easy and flexible and relaxed. Scan through your body and just notice if there's any little patterns of tension and holding in your body, perhaps around your throat or your jaw. Sometimes we'll notice it around our eyes. And gently breathing into any areas that feel tight or stuck. Allowing those little patterns of tension to melt away. So your body can become quite soft and relaxed and open. Feel the breath moving in the front of your body, cultivating a sense of breathing with the whole of your body, having a sense of the whole of your body being connected to the movement of the breath. Staying very soft and relaxed, but at the same time quite alert and quite precise. So we're noticing the whole of the in-breath and noticing the whole of the out-breath. In the first stage, counting quite lightly to ourselves, counting at the end of each out-breath. Breathing in, breathing out, counting 1. Counting 2. Breathing in, breathing out, counting 3. And when you get to 10, going back and starting again. Now in the second stage, counting very lightly in the gap before each in-breath. Counting from 1 to 10. Trying to stay continuously present to the flowing movement of each in-breath and out-breath. So now we just let go of the counting. Staying with the movement of the breathing. Continuous present moment awareness. Moving with the breath. Staying connected to your body. Letting go of tension and holding the body. And we can reflect on this process of breathing. With each in-breath, the air drawing into our bodies, bringing oxygen, bringing life into the cells of our bodies. And on the out-breath, giving back the used air. We can notice that this breath is like a flow, changing moment by moment. The air coming in from the outside world, going back to the world on the out-breath. And we can reflect that this process of breathing isn't me, it's not mine. The in-breath, the air comes from the world. On the out-breath, we give the air back to the world. As we stay with this breath and with this reflection that the breath is impermanent, our awareness of the breath is changing moment by moment, we look for a sense of deepening peace and freedom, letting go of attachment. Just looking for a deepening sense of connectedness with the world that feeds us with oxygen every in-breath. We can bring awareness to the physical sensations in our bodies. It's the feeling of our body resting on the ground, the weight of our bodies dropping down into the cushion of the seat. We can reflect that the mass of our bodies comes from the food that we've eaten, the liquid that we've drunk. That these physical aspects of the body, in a sense, are borrowed from the outside world. This body is made up of elements that we've taken in from the world in the form of food and drink. Perhaps we can reflect that the liquids in our bodies were once rivers, were once clouds, was once rain. That the liquids in our body will go back to those elements in the world. We can reflect that this body of ours isn't fixed and separate from the world. It's actually part of the interconnected nature of the world. And in this sense, our bodies are not ours. They're not mine or me. Bodies and physical sensations in our bodies arise and pass away in dependence on conditions. Nothing fixed or separate. And again, as we reflect in this way, looking for a sense of peace, freedom, a sense of letting go. We can reflect that even our minds, our awareness, is changing moment by moment. So we can notice as we breathe in, we know we're breathing in. And as we breathe out, we know we're breathing out. So with every experience, an awareness of that experience arises and passes away with the experience itself. So as we stay with this flow of experience, flowing experience of the breath, of the body, and the flow of awareness itself. We can reflect that none of this is me. None of this ultimately is mine. All of this just arises and passes away moment by moment, like a dream. And as we reflect in this way, looking to open to a deeper sense of peace and freedom. So opening to a sense of being deeply connected with the world around us and with the lives of all other living beings. So in a minute or so I'll ring the bell to bring the practice to an end. So we just sit for another minute, staying with the movement of the breath, opening to this sense of peace and freedom and deep interconnectedness. We're not fixed and separate. We're actually part of a wonderful and vast, interconnected universe. We're actually part of everything, and everything is part of us. So now in our own time we'll bring this period of meditation and reflection to an end. Just coming back to an ordinary sense of yourself, your ordinary self. And when you're ready, opening your eyes. We've got some time now for questions. If there's any questions that you have or anything you want to share or discuss, then do put it in the chat and we'll do our best to answer it.
Without putting you on the spot, Jack, did you have any questions?
It's usually me, isn't it? Usually me who gets the ball rolling.
You can usually be depended upon for questions.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got it, Silicon. I think I get it.
Good. Okay, good. I'm glad somebody does. Good.
Yeah.
I think in a way the whole of the Dharma life actually is in this teaching, because I think when we hear something like this, it does resonate with us. We kind of go, oh yeah, that's it, that's the truth. But then, within a couple of hours, we'll find ourselves, I don't know, somebody will take our parking space, or I don't know, we'll find ourselves, this self that we've seen through and realised doesn't actually exist, will come back with, quite a lot of force, So in a way, in our Dharma lives, we kind of move, I think, between, in a way, this insight into non-self, and then the day-to-day experience of ourselves being triggered by, the situations in our lives, and we sort of move between those two, I think, over and over again, from, a theoretical understanding that there's no self to an actual lived experience of, ourself being triggered. There's a wonderful teaching. Somebody said, if you're riding along on a horse and you lose your footing and you fall off the horse, what do you think about in the second between you falling off the horse and hitting the ground? Nearly all of us will think about ourselves, and we'll think, I don't know, what about myself? So, in a way, we're not really working against a theoretical understanding of the self. What we're really working with is our kind of visceral gut feeling of being a self, if that makes sense. And that's that sense of self, which is, and that's very much our kind of ethical life. Our ethical life is working with that, in a way, that gap between understanding that the self is conditioned and then the very strong emotional gut sense that, you can't talk to me like that, or, whatever goes through our minds.
I do, just as you were kind of saying that, the question did kind of form, which is like, could you give an example of an experience you've had where this felt sense of non-self has kind of broken through, and it's kind of eased your suffering in some way?
Yeah. I could think of quite a lot of examples. I think as you carry on practicing, it becomes more and more the kind of working ground, actually. I mean, I could think just last week, there was an interaction that had at work that, just triggered me, and I was thinking, how can that person talk to me like that? Why that person just not taking me into account at all? And, but don't they realise kind of how long I've been working at this place and how important I am, and how could, all this sort of stuff going on. And then, after about an hour of this, I just kind of sat down on my sofa at home in front of my shrine and just thought, hang on a sec, Siddhika, what do you think's going on here? What are you doing? How come you allowed yourself to get fooled by, the samsaric illusion of selfhood? And it almost, and then quite quickly had the sense of, okay, no, actually, just let it go. Actually, this whole thing is not actually really based on anything. It's just reactive mental stuff. So yeah, my experience was of both sides of it. Both of being very caught up in the illusion of, because it feels so real, doesn't it? If somebody disrespects us or doesn't give us what we think we're due, we can feel really uptight and outraged about it. And then, feeling the suffering of that, and then, in a way, quite quickly just saying, hang on a sec, actually, come on, we've been doing this long enough to know that actually things aren't actually like this. Things don't actually, the world doesn't actually revolve around me and myself and my self-interest. I know that. And, in that moment of seeing it, catching it, there's a kind of, what a relief, It's like the whole thing can just sort of collapse. And then, out of that we can have a sense of, sense of ease. And, maybe we still, want to address an issue. We may feel that, we do have a point that we want to make, or something we need to say, or some need we need to express. But somehow the kind of emotional drama of it, if you see what I mean, it's not necessarily that we're always wrong when, somebody has a go at us or whatever. You know, if somebody genuinely is abusing us, it's good to be able to take action against that. But it's that whole kind of energy that things get when our sense of self is triggered. That's the kind of avoidable suffering of it. If that makes sense. And we've probably all had that experience, haven't we? The way, you know, something happens, you know, that triggers us, and we find ourselves going over and over and over in our minds, and we're thinking this, you know, and we kind of rehearse, you know, things that we're going to say to this person, you know, kind of revenge comments we're going to make, sort of cutting comments we're going to make back, and we get this whole sort of drama going on, and the energy of it, I think, is that energy of that's what we're really targeting, I think, with this practice, you know. So hopefully, you know, if we can carry on practicing in this way, you know, over time, the kind of momentum and the force of the energy that gathers around the sense of self becomes much less.
The questions have started flooding in.
Okay.
This always happens. It's like no one wants to be the first, and then so I think. Oh God, there's quite a lot. We're not going to really be able to. Just have you got
one or two?
Yeah, we'll take a few minutes.
Yeah. Have you got them there? The questions.
I can't see them.
Okay.
No, just
All right. I'll read them out then.
Okay.
Pick the easy ones.
Okay. So Tara says, if we are not who we tell ourselves, what/who are we? I guess if we are not the person who we tell ourselves we are,
Yeah.
then what are we?
what are we? Well, I mean, the Buddhist tradition talks about, you know, breaks our experience down, doesn't it, into the 5 skandhas. So we have, you know, we have form, feeling, thought, volition, and consciousness. So our experience is made up of a continuous stream of thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, volitions, and a kind of sense of awareness which kind of holds it all together. And all of those, in a way, those are a bit like, I think a way of describing it is a bit like they're instruments, and they're playing in like a string quartet or a string quintet, because there's the 5 skandhas. So we get this sense, our sense of self, if you like, is made up of, in a way, these 5 instruments all playing their own tune, kind of moment by moment. Yeah, and that's what we are. That's what we are. We're these different types of conditions arising and passing away moment by moment. And then I think we do have a sense of continuity. I mean, one of the things I've been learning about recently is that one of the things our mind does, and it's almost like the main function of our mind actually, is to hold all of our experience together and give us this sense of kind of continuity. So we do have a sense of self, actually, and we need to have a sense of self. We need to have a sense of self to know what to do and where we live and where to go and where we've left our keys, and you know who we're in relationships with and what roles we play in relation to it. So we need a sense of self to kind of hold everything together in our lives. Yeah. But the point that Buddhism is getting at is the fact that we have this kind of continuous sense of self doesn't mean that our self actually absolutely exists. You know, our self is actually made up of these constantly changing patterns of different types of experience. And actually this vision of the self is more wonderful and more kind of creative and more mind-blowing actually than, you know, any sense we might have of being a kind of fixed identity. Because the point is, if we can develop that sense of self, we realise that our consciousness and our experience and our potentiality is incredibly malleable. Actually, we can change our own reality to an extraordinary extent. You know, so we can be very, very creative once we start to kind of loosen the sense that our self is a kind of fixed, limited sort of thing. You could say actually, it's also, you know, what we're letting go is a limited sense of self. You know, it's the limitation that comes with the sense of self that I'm not that kind of person. I can't possibly do that kind of thing. You know, we're letting go of that sense of self, and opening up to a much, much broader range of possibilities of consciousness and being.
Okay, I'll go to the next one. So Annie asks, I think you may have kind of touched on this already, but it's kind of further into the practical day-to-day nature of it. How does one manage to maintain this connection to the insubstantial sense of self within the workplace where one's individual performance is so in focus? And is it inevitable that we'll constantly fall into the trap of kind of getting caught up in the self and then remembering and then getting caught up and then remembering, like you were saying? Or is there, I think she's kind of saying, is there some way that we can live in this?
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. I mean, I think this is a sort of spectrum, isn't it? I think it is inevitable that we lose that insight. I mean, I don't know what being a fully enlightened being is like, but I imagine being a fully enlightened being, perhaps you wouldn't ever lose that central insight. But for those of us who are not fully enlightened, there's this process of forgetting it, remembering it, losing it, and coming back to it. And that's really the practice of the spiritual life. And it's also the practice of Buddhist ethics. In a way, how do we bring that sense of the emptiness of the self into our lives? Well, the answer is by practicing ethics, by practicing generosity is a kind of a physical manifestation of a letting go of selfhood. Actually, kindness is a physical manifestation of it. I mean, something I notice in myself is being willing to be flexible with my attention in the workplace. Like, I notice that if I'm working on something, I can get quite kind of, well, I need to focus on this. If somebody else comes in, or I get a phone call from somebody, they might be interested in something quite different. So there's a practice around, well, how easy is it for me to just, switch my focus from, me and my project to what's coming in, what's this other person, what they're interested in, how open can I be to what somebody else is saying and asking. So that would be a practical example of how we could do it. And in a way, the looser our sense of self, the easier it should be to switch our focus, maybe from being very focused on a particular task to taking in somebody else and being in relationship. So that's just an example, but I mean, there's a huge amount, I guess one could say about that. In a way, the whole topic of Buddhist ethics really grows out of that question. How can we operate less as an ego identity in all of the areas of our lives?
That's probably all we've got time for with the questions.
Good questions. Really good questions. Yeah.
Okay, so shall we go back to...
Okay, so thank you everyone. So just a couple of things from me before we end. So I'd like to start off by making a dana appeal, and dana is the Sanskrit word for generosity, so it's an appeal to your generosity. And as Sudhika said just now, practicing generosity is a practice of letting go of the self. So this is another opportunity, in addition to meditation, to put the teachings from tonight into practice. And all like sort of joking aside, we really do rely on your generosity to help keep the classes going. We welcome everybody to join us, regardless of what you can afford. But our classes are powered by donations. So we have a sort of total we aim for every month of £2,000. And that's what's needed to sort of pay the rent in this place. It's about half the money. Also to pay the part-time wages of the couple of staff we employ, and to pay for all the tech and the other expenses that are associated with putting on these classes. So please do consider donating. If we were face to face, we would have our dana bowl that we'd ask you to put in some change at the end of the class. But please do. Jack's going to put a link online to how you can donate online, so please do consider making a donation today. And then just to end with just some announcements. So with the changes to the lockdown restrictions, we're delighted to announce that our Wednesday night classes, we can open those back up to face again. And this week's theme, so the Wednesday nights are really an opportunity to take some of these teachings into Buddhism a bit deeper. And our theme for this Wednesday is all on, I mean, it's a really grand sounding title, it sounds really exciting, is on the conscious evolution of humankind. So that starts at 7:30 this Wednesday, and Jack will put in a link that you can click on to sort of sign up for that. So do consider coming to that face to face, and the link to it will be on YouTube a few days later if you don't get the chance to come tonight. To the class on Wednesday. And then finally, so we'll be ending in a couple of minutes, but at 1:45 there'll be a Zoom call, just to have the chance to connect to some of the people you've been meditating along with at home, and to discuss what we've been talking about and your practice more generally in a bit more detail. So please do join the Zoom call afterwards. And yeah, that's it from us, but thank you, Sudhika, I really enjoyed your talk. Thanks, Jack, for, as ever, with your support with the tech. And thank you for joining us at home. And yeah, really look forward to seeing you soon. So thank you.